Rain slammed sideways against the rusted shelter door, a curtain of cold slicing through the dark like a knife. Inside, the tin roof trembled under the storm's weight, every drop pounding like a ticking clock. A deep, primal growl rippled through the silence, just before a woman's scream cut the air. She stumbled back, shielding her child behind her as the dog lunged forward, not at them, but past them. His chain, frayed and barely holding, snapped with a metallic pop, and the old shepherd burst into the hallway, a blur of muscle and mud-caked fur. "Max! No! Wait!" The shelter worker's voice was too late. The dog was already gone, paws thudding against concrete, tail stiff, eyes locked on something none of them had seen yet. But he had. Outside, the parking lot was a mess of headlights and shadows. The van was still idling near the edge of the lot, half lit by the flickering street lamp. Max hurtled toward it, barking like his chest would cave in. Inside the shelter, the woman clutched her daughter, panting, soaked, her coat barely covering the girl's bare legs. Her shoes were torn. Her voice trembled. "I swear, he didn't growl at us. He was trying to warn us. I think he saw them." Them. A man had been standing near the van moments ago. Just standing, watching. When Max charged, he'd vanished into the dark like he'd never existed. But the back door of the van was still cracked open. Shelter staff scrambled, flashlights darted, someone was shouting for animal control, another called 911. But Max was already sniffing around the van, nose to the wind, growling low, like whatever scent he'd found went deeper than just trouble. The little girl, her teeth chattering, stared at him. He knew we were in danger," she whispered. Max didn't belong to the shelter. Not really. He'd arrived 2 weeks ago, dumped after hours with no collar, no paperwork, just a note duct taped to his cage. Too dangerous, not safe, do not rehome. But from the moment he'd been dropped off, he hadn't barked, hadn't bit, just sat, waiting, watching, and now this. The police came fast after the call, too fast for a slow night like this. Something about it all had them on edge. A vehicle spotted matching a suspect description, a girl missing from a neighboring town. The mother, wide-eyed and shaking, wasn't her mother at all. That girl was someone else's child, and Max had known. Later that night, long after the flashing lights had disappeared and the girl had been wrapped in a dry blanket, a new pair of shoes tucked beside her small feet, the shelter director stood in the kennel, staring at Max. His fur was soaked. His side bore an old scar, white and jagged. He lay on the cold concrete again, back in the same cage he'd burst out of. He didn't pace, didn't whine, just lay there, eyes open, ears perked, waiting. "Why'd they say you were dangerous?" the director whispered. Max didn't blink. A vet would later confirm what they suspected. Max had once been trained. His obedience was too sharp, his reactions too fast. Bite control, target alert, possibly K9. But whatever job he'd been given, whatever badge he'd worked beside, it had been taken from him. Maybe for being too aggressive, maybe for something worse. But tonight, this so-called broken dog had saved a girl who wasn't meant to make it through that parking lot. It would have been easy to forget. The city had other headlines, other stories. But one officer didn't forget. He stood quietly in front of Max's cage 3 days later. No uniform this time, just jeans, boots, and a faded army jacket. The shelter director raised a brow. "You the one who called about him?" "I'm the one who trained him." His voice was hoarse. "Back when we both still had jobs that mattered." He stepped closer, knelt. Max didn't move, didn't wag, just stared. "I'm sorry," the man whispered. "They said I had to put you down. I didn't. He swallowed. "I couldn't, so I let you go. Dropped you off out of district. Figured you'd find your own way." The director's breath hitched. "You left him?" "I thought I was saving him." His jaw tightened. "That was before I lost everything." Max finally stood, slow but sure, walked to the bars and licked the man's hand. "Still remember me?" he asked, voice cracking. The silence answered louder than any bark. The director didn't ask more questions, didn't need to. Something broken had found something familiar. In a world that discards its wounded too easily, two souls that had been left behind just found each other again. But neither of them knew. This was only the beginning, because the girl Max saved, she wasn't just a victim. She was a key, and someone out there wanted her back. Someone who wasn't going to stop, not even for a dog, especially not for that dog. And as thunder rolled once more across the empty sky, Max didn't flinch. He was waiting for the fight, waiting to prove that a discarded soul still had purpose, still had bite, still had one last mission to complete, and he wasn't alone anymore. If you've made it this far into the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Share this with someone who believes in second chances. Part 2 continues the journey, and things are about to get a whole lot darker. The rain had eased by morning, but the shelter still smelled like wet concrete and ghosted fur. The city buzzed awake on the other side of the chain-link fence, honking horns, brakes screeching, sirens pulsing through the dawn haze. Inside kennel number 7, Max lay with his head resting on his paws, golden eyes fixed on the man sitting across from him on a worn wooden bench. He hadn't said much yet, just sat there, still wearing the same faded army jacket, his boots damp from the night before. His name was Coulter Hayes, former K-9 handler, medically discharged, emotionally discarded. And Max, his old partner, was supposed to be dead. The paper trail was clear. Max had failed out of evaluation, labeled unpredictable, dangerous. Aggression noted in final assessments. Officially retired, then slated for euthanasia. Only Coulter hadn't followed through. He'd driven 3 hours out of state, opened Max's crate, and walked away without a word. "I thought I was giving you a shot," he muttered now, voice rough like gravel. "Turns out you gave me one." Max didn't move, didn't need to. His presence filled the room like gravity, silent, grounded, heavy with memory. The shelter director tapped lightly at the doorframe. "You're sure he's yours?" Coulter nodded. "I trained him from pup, knew him better than anyone, until the panic attack started. Mine, not his." She studied him. "You abandoned a trained K-9. "I was unstable. They didn't want me handling a toothbrush, let alone a service dog." He stood, brushing his hands on his jeans. "But he saved a kid. That counts for something, doesn't it?" She glanced toward Max. "It counts for everything." 2 blocks away, in a foster facility disguised as a community center, the girl sat by a window, arms wrapped tight around a borrowed teddy bear. Her name was Callie, 8 years old, eyes too old for her face, voice barely above a whisper. She hadn't spoken much since the night before. But when one of the officers mentioned the dog, she turned. "The one who barked?" "Yes," the officer said. "His name's Max." She clutched the bear tighter. "He knew. He didn't bark at me. He barked at them." "What did you see, Callie?" Her lips parted, eyes glazing. "A man. He opened the van. I was supposed to go with him. She said if I didn't listen, they'd hurt my real mommy again." "She?" Callie didn't answer, just pressed her face into the bear's fur and began to cry. Later that day, Coulter stood in the shelter's intake room, signing the last of the paperwork. Max was already by his side, tail low, ears alert. The minute the cage had opened, he hadn't hesitated. No leash, no command, just walked to Coulter's side like he'd never left. "I don't know what you're planning," the shelter director said, eyes narrowed. "But this isn't just some reunion. That girl's rescue spooked someone. You think they'll stop?" Coulter clipped on a service vest. Not official anymore, but enough to keep them moving. "I'm not letting him get buried in a kennel again. Not when he knows more than anyone's asking." He paused. "You saw how she looked at him. She looked at him like he was the only thing in the world she trusted." Exactly. That afternoon, they returned to the center. Callie was eating apple slices, legs swinging over the edge of a plastic chair. When Max entered the room, she dropped the slice and ran. But not away, straight to him. Max didn't flinch, just sat, calm and unmoving, as her small hands wrapped around his neck and her face buried in his fur. Her shoulders trembled. She made no sound. Coulter watched from the doorway, something in his chest cracking open after years of being welded shut. "She hasn't let anyone touch her since she got here," one of the social workers whispered. "Not even other kids." Max nuzzled her gently, nose pushing under her chin. Her giggle was quiet, surprised. "Can he stay with her?" she asked. "Please?" "I don't feel scared when he's here." Coulter stepped forward. "You remember what happened that night, don't you, Callie?" Her nod was barely visible. "Do you think Max could help you tell the truth?" She looked at Max. He looked back, and something passed between them. Pure, silent, weightless. "Yes," she said finally, "if he's there." The statement took hours. Piece by piece, between tears and long silences, Callie spoke. She'd been taken from her mother 6 weeks earlier. A woman named Tamra had claimed to be her aunt, had fake paperwork, knew her birthday, her school, her allergies. "She made me call her Mama T," Callie said. "She told me we were going on a trip, that my mom told her to take care of me while she got better." But her mom wasn't sick. Her mom had filed a missing child report and had been searching for her ever since. Tamra was part of something larger, a network. Callie had been housed in 3 different locations already. "She said I was special, that people would pay more for a kid who was quiet and behaved." Max growled low. Not at her, just into the air. Like he remembered what darkness smelled like. Coulter's jaw clenched so hard it popped. "She was going to take me somewhere new," Callie whispered. "That night, but I saw her texting someone. She said the buyer wants her awake this time." Silence flooded the room. "I saw his face," she said. The social worker leaned in. "Whose?" Callie turned, eyes wide and hollow. "The man outside the van, the one Max barked at. He was there the first time too. When they took me from the playground." She shook. "He had a scar here." She pointed to the left side of her jaw. "And he smelled like matches." Coulter went still. Max rose to his feet. "Someone's coming for her," he said quietly. "And she's not safe here. She's in a registered foster home, which is the first place they'll look. But you're not her family." Coulter turned to the social worker, the fire in his eyes no longer dim. Neither were they. Back at his apartment, tiny, barely furnished and dimly lit, Coulter placed a sleeping Callie on the couch and knelt beside Max. "You were trained for war," he murmured, stroking the dog's head. "But this is a whole different battlefield." Max closed his eyes, leaned into the touch. "We're in it now, whether we're ready or not." A knock rattled the door. Not loud, not hard, just slow, intentional. 3 slow knocks. Coulter stood slowly, hand instinctively brushing the holster on his belt. A habit that hadn't died even though his weapon had been taken away long ago. Max stood beside him, tense, ears forward. Another knock, and then a voice, muffled but deliberate. "You've got something that belongs to me." Callie stirred. Max growled, and Coulter knew. This was no longer just about protection. This was war. If you're invested in Max and Callie's story, now's the time to like this video. Drop a comment and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. The danger's closing in, and the only way out is through. Part 3 is where things start to unravel. Coulter didn't open the door. He didn't need to. He could see the shadow through the frosted glass, the silhouette of a man standing just off-center, arms relaxed. But not in the way you relax when you're safe. More like the calm before a predator moves. Max was already pressed to the edge of the doorframe, shoulders stiff, muscles taut beneath his coat. His breath was shallow, silent, waiting. Callie, half asleep on the couch, stirred again. The knocking stopped. A moment later, footsteps receded, too slow to be retreat. No tires squealing, no door slamming. Just quiet. Too quiet. Coulter waited 3 minutes, then moved. He crouched low, peeked through the window's edge, and scanned the lot. Empty. But only fools believed what the eyes showed. "They'll be back," he whispered. He turned back to Max. "We need to move." Max didn't hesitate. He never did. 20 minutes later, they were back on the road. Callie still wore her oversized hoodie, the sleeves swallowing her hands, and clutched the teddy bear so tightly it looked like it might tear. The back seat of Coulter's beat-up sedan creaked beneath her shifting weight. "Where are we going?" she asked, voice thin but clear. Coulter didn't answer right away. Not because he didn't want to, because he didn't know. Every contact he used to have was either burned, gone, or still trying to forget the past. And he'd spent so long off the grid that even the grid forgot he existed. But there was one place, one he hadn't dared visit in years, an old ranch house north of the county line, owned by a woman who once patched up a bullet wound in his shoulder with whiskey, thread, and spite. The kind of woman who knew when to keep a door open and when to point a shotgun through it. He hadn't spoken to her since the day he left the Corps, but if anyone would help them disappear, even for a night, it was Mercy. They hit the gravel road an hour before dusk. Dust clouded behind the tires. Max had his head between the front seats, his eyes never leaving the side mirrors. As the house came into view, Callie leaned forward. "It's big," she said softly. "Big means hard to find the corners," Coulter replied. "Corners are where secrets hide." She didn't understand, but she nodded anyway. When they reached the porch, the door creaked open before Coulter could knock. Mercy stood in the doorway, shotgun resting against her shoulder like an extension of her soul. "You've got 3 seconds to explain before I start counting down from 2. Coulter raised both hands. "I'm not here to bring trouble. You never bring it. It follows you like a shadow." Then her eyes dropped. Saw Callie, then Max. Her gaze softened just a degree. "You brought the dog." "He brought me," Coulter said. A long pause, then she stepped aside. "Come in." The ranch was quiet, the kind of quiet that held stories in the floorboards and secrets in the attic. Mercy moved like someone who never forgot how to listen with her spine. Every curtain was drawn, every lock double-checked. Callie curled up with Max in the corner of the living room, while Coulter explained. When he finished, Mercy didn't speak for a long time. Finally, she lit a cigarette and stared through the smoke. "I've heard of these people, the ones who move kids like product. They almost took her. Max stopped it." Mercy glanced toward the sleeping girl, and the dog curled protectively at her side. "He's not just a dog," she said. "No," Coulter replied. "He's a compass. Every time I've been lost, he's the only reason I made it back." "And you think this girl's connected to something deeper?" "She saw the man who took her. She can describe him." Mercy's eyes narrowed. "And you think they'll stop now that she got away?" "No." "Then we don't wait for them to come. We bring the fight to them." That night, while Callie slept under a thick quilt and Max stood watch at the bedroom door, Coulter and Mercy sat at the kitchen table, sifting through everything they had. Fake IDs, staged paperwork, the van's license plate, half remembered, the address where Callie had been kept before the last move. Mercy pulled out her laptop. "Let's see what the dark web has to say about our ghost." They searched aliases, filtered images through old law enforcement back channels, and cross-referenced burn lists. An hour later, they had a name. Jonas Riker, former corrections officer, discharged after multiple complaints of excessive force, disappeared 4 years ago. Now rumored to be connected to at least 3 known trafficking operations in the Southwest. Coulter leaned back in his chair. "That's the man with the scar." Mercy nodded. "He's more than a middleman. He collects." Coulter's fist clenched. "I should have buried him when I had the chance." It was nearly 3 a.m. when Max suddenly growled. Low, menacing. Coulter was on his feet in seconds, weapon raised. Mercy followed him to the back of the house, shotgun in hand. Max was already by the window, teeth bared, ears flat. Callie woke in the next room, her voice trembling. "What's wrong?" "Stay here," Coulter said, pressing the door shut behind him. Outside, faint lights blinked in the tree line. Not headlights, infrared. "They've found us," Mercy said. Coulter's jaw tightened. "No way they tracked us this fast." "Someone tipped them off." "Who?" Mercy shook her head. But Coulter already knew. The shelter director. She'd been kind, helpful, too helpful. "They're moving," Mercy whispered. Figures emerged from the trees. 3, maybe 4. Tactical gear, suppressed weapons. One held a phone to his ear, pacing. "They're waiting for a go." Coulter raised his gun. Then let's make sure it never comes. What happened next was quick and savage. Mercy disabled the power to the outer fence, triggering the security floodlights to blast the clearing. Max burst through the door like a missile, jaws locking onto the lead man's arm before he could raise his weapon. Coulter moved like old instincts had never left him, firing twice, then tackling the second attacker behind the shed. Mercy's shotgun roared, scattering the others, but one of them slipped away. Toward the house, toward Callie. Coulter heard her scream just before he reached the porch. Max was faster. He tore through the open door, snarling. By the time Coulter got inside, the intruder was already down, face bloodied, wrist bent unnaturally. Max stood over him, breathing heavy, growling softly. Callie was in the corner, eyes wide, shaking. Coulter dropped to his knees beside her. "You're okay," he whispered. "You're safe." Her arms wrapped around his neck, desperate and silent, and he realized for the first time, this wasn't about redemption anymore. It was about responsibility. He looked at Max, at Callie, and he knew this wasn't temporary. This was his family now. If Max's loyalty moved you, and you believe every child deserves a protector like him, hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe. Part 4 is coming, and things are about to get even more dangerous for all of them. The man in the shed was still breathing, barely. Coulter stood over him as morning bled into the horizon, painting the sky in bruised shades of gray and red. Max stood beside him, blood on his muzzle, calm now, waiting for a signal. The intruder's vest was marked with nothing. No insignia, no badge, just reinforced padding and cold efficiency. Coulter yanked the earpiece from his head. "Who sent you?" The man coughed, laughed, then spat blood at Coulter's boots. Max inched forward, lips curling. Coulter leaned in, voice quiet, dangerous. "She's a child. What kind of man follows orders like that?" But the man only grinned, even with broken teeth. "You don't know what you're in, do you? This isn't some rogue ring. This goes all the way up." His eyes rolled back. A click from inside his vest. "Max, back." Coulter dove just as the vest popped. Not an explosion, just a sharp mechanical hiss. Cyanide capsule, built into the lining. The man seized once, then stilled. Max growled low, unsettled. Mercy stepped through the barn doors, shotgun still slung over her shoulder. "Clean," she said. "No one else out there. I checked the tree line." Coulter nodded. "We've got bigger problems." He lifted the vest, examining the stitching. No ID, no serials, just precision. These weren't mercs. They were assets, and someone with real reach wanted that girl silenced. Inside the house, Callie stood at the window, watching Max as he paced the yard. She hadn't said much since the attack, but her hands moved constantly, fidgeting with the frayed sleeve of her sweatshirt, tracing patterns on the frosted glass. Coulter came up behind her. "You okay?" She didn't answer right away. Then, "Why did they come here?" He knelt beside her. "Because they're scared of what you remember." Callie looked down. "I don't remember much. Just the sound of a zipper. His boots, that smell, like bleach and lemon. Like a hotel, but wrong." Coulter's chest tightened. He didn't need all the details. He'd seen the aftermath in war zones and in shelters back home. But hearing it from a child, one who shouldn't even know what fear tastes like yet, it felt like poison sliding under his skin. "You remembered enough to hurt them," he said. "That's why Max found you." She looked at the dog now, eyes full of something fragile. "He doesn't leave me, not even when I sleep." Coulter nodded. "That's what makes him special." "Is that why you trust him?" He smiled. "Max saved more lives overseas than I ever did. He's more than a dog. He feels what people try to hide." Callie paused. "Do you think he can feel when someone's lying?" Coulter looked at her, quietly. "Yeah, why?" She hesitated, then whispered, "The man who said he was my uncle. Max didn't bark when he first showed up. He just watched him, like he knew something was wrong but didn't want to scare me yet." Coulter swallowed the rising anger. Max was probably waiting. Sometimes the truth takes time to show. Later that evening, Mercy patched into a law enforcement database using backdoor protocols she hadn't used in years. She tapped at the keys, biting her lip. "You're not gonna like this." Coulter leaned over. She pulled up a report. A fire at a group home in Nevada. 5 children dead, 2 missing. No survivors listed. One of the missing? Callie's photo. Coulter stepped back. "They wrote her off." Mercy nodded. "And look who signed off the report." She zoomed in. Coulter's jaw clenched. Deputy Marshal Vincent Rallin. He remembered the name. Quiet man. Clean record. Too clean. He'd worked with Coulter once, only briefly, but Coulter had felt it then, something hollow behind the man's eyes. Why would a marshal cover this up? Because he's not just covering it, Mercy said. He's part of it. She pulled up a second file, hidden, encrypted. "I found this on the dark net, a classified database dump from a raid in 2022. Codename, Safe Haven. You ever heard of it?" Coulter's voice was tight. "No." "Because it was buried. It was supposed to be a sting on child trafficking cells embedded in recovery centers. Half of it got leaked, and then the operation vanished. No arrests, no headlines, just disappeared." She clicked through the images, security footage, empty hallways, locked rooms. Children's faces blurred out, except one. Callie, standing in the corner of a dark room, holding her teddy bear, staring at a camera. Coulter's heart broke open and bled through his ribs. "She's been inside since she was 5, Mercy said, moving through homes like furniture. She didn't get lost, she was placed." He felt the nausea crawl up his throat. "How many others?" Mercy didn't answer. She didn't have to. The silence said it all. That night, as a storm gathered outside, Callie had another nightmare. Screams, flashing lights, someone yelling her name, and then a hallway, metal walls, rows of beds, a red door at the end. She woke gasping, and Max was already there, pressing close, letting her bury her face in his fur. Coulter stood in the doorway, watching, hands trembling. When she calmed, he sat beside her on the floor. "You remembered something," he said gently. She nodded. "The red door, it had letters on it. I think that's where they took the others." He closed his eyes. "Can you draw it for me?" Callie picked up the broken crayon from the nightstand and, with small hands, began to sketch. Mercy entered quietly, holding her phone. "Bad news," she said, holding up the screen. "Vincent Rallin just arrived in the state. Officially, he's here for a missing fugitive case." Coulter didn't flinch. "He's not here for a fugitive." "No," Mercy agreed. "He's here for her." They stared at the crayon drawing together. A door. Red, with 5 letters on the sign above it. The letters spelled Lilac. Coulter's breath caught. He'd heard that name before. A facility in Arizona, shut down after allegations, quietly reopened under another name. Lilac House. He stood slowly. "They want her memory erased," he said, "because if she remembers what's behind that door, it burns them all." He turned to Mercy. "We need to go there. Not to run, to end it." Mercy nodded. "And you know it won't be clean." "No," he said, "but it'll be just." As thunder cracked above them, Max turned toward the window, body tense again. They all knew. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. It was war. And this time they weren't running, they were hunting. If your heart's pounding like ours and you believe no child should be forgotten, make sure to hit the like button. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe. Part 5 is coming soon, and they're heading straight into the lion's den. The bus reeked of mildew and gasoline. Coulter drove with both hands gripping the wheel, eyes scanning the endless stretch of highway ahead. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the horizon glowed faint orange, like a promise. In the rearview mirror, Max sat pressed close to Callie on the bench seat behind him. She clutched her crayon drawing, the red door labeled Lilac, folded neatly like a map. Mercy was in the last row, hunched over a battered laptop with wires snaking to a signal booster duct taped to the window. They'd left at 3 a.m. with only what they could carry. They didn't have a plan yet, just a direction and a conviction. Lilac House was somewhere outside Tucson. Its name had been erased from federal records, rebranded twice, moved once, but Mercy had traced its power bills, delivery routes, and a peculiar spike in broadband activity. A hidden facility masquerading as a youth rehab center, miles off-grid, no signs, no neighbors. They thought burying it in the desert would erase the truth, Mercy said, but they forgot what happens when someone survives. Callie didn't speak much during the ride. She stared out the window with hollow eyes, sometimes stroking Max's ear, sometimes whispering to him so softly not even the engine noise could drown it. Coulter watched her reflection in the mirror. That little girl. She had walked through more darkness than most grown men could name, and yet she hadn't crumbled. He thought about the war, about the boys he couldn't bring back, about the orders he followed that made no sense until the damage was done. Then he looked at Max, his only real constant, the one soul who'd stood by him, even when his own hands shook too much to hold a weapon steady. 2 mile, Mercy said, lifting her head. The road ends. We walk from there. Coulter nodded. They ditched the van behind a ridge and went in on foot. The desert air was sharp and dry, filled with thorny silence. Callie walked between them, Max always ahead, ears forward, tail low, alert, tense. The sun now climbed high enough to cast long shadows across the sand. And then, there it was. A flat, pale gray structure crouched low against the landscape. Fences lined with concertina wire, cameras on poles that spun lazily, their red LEDs blinking like eyes. No signage, no welcoming gate. Lilac House. Coulter lowered his binoculars. Looks more like a detention center than a shelter. Mercy scoffed. That's because it is. Every inch of it screams containment, not care. They crouched behind a fallen rock face, mapping the perimeter. Coulter pointed. Guard rotations light. They're not expecting trouble. Because they think trouble won't come back, Mercy said. Callie said nothing, but her hand slipped into Coulter's. She didn't flinch anymore, just held on. He looked down at her. You okay? She shook her head. But I want to go. Max stepped forward again, then stopped. A low, sharp bark. Mercy raised her scope. Vehicle approaching, black SUV. It came fast across the dirt track, bouncing, then rolled to a smooth stop inside the gate. From it stepped a tall man in a tactical suit, dark, pressed, precise. Coulter tensed. That's him, Vincent Rallin. Even from a distance, Coulter could see the cold discipline in his posture. The kind of man who weaponized charm when needed, but never let it dull the steel underneath. Callie whispered, he was there, at the first place, the one that burned. Coulter's fists clenched. Max growled deep, barely restrained. Inside the compound, Rallin spoke to a staff member, then glanced at the gate's security panel. Within moments, the fences parted, opening just wide enough for entry. We're going in, Coulter said. Mercy looked at him. We're 3 people and a dog. This isn't a rescue, it's an infiltration. He nodded. That's the point. They waited until nightfall. The stars came out bright and sharp above them, the desert falling into that peculiar stillness that felt more like a held breath than peace. Mercy handed Coulter a flash drive. This has everything. Names, locations, financial trails. Once we're in, we copy it onto their main server. If anything happens to us, this data goes public. What about backup? Working on it. But the right kind of people are few. We need leverage before they take us seriously. They scaled the wall at the blind spot between 2 cameras. Mercy disabled the outer sensor in seconds, sliding in a bypass pin she crafted from copper wire and soldered circuitry. Inside, the facility smelled sterile, like bleach and plastic and forced calm. The hallway lights flickered on low pulse. Every door they passed had a number, no windows, just reinforced glass on observation slots. Max stopped at one, scratched it. Coulter peered inside. A boy, maybe 11, sat on the floor, rocking slowly, eyes wide open, pupils dilated, a bruise on his temple. Callie pressed against the glass. That's Tyler. He tried to run once. Coulter looked at Mercy. We opened them all, he said, but she shook her head. Not yet. We need the control room. That's where they'll lock down the entire facility if they detect a breach. They move fast. Max led them through the halls like he knew every path already, the weight of history in his bones. He stopped suddenly and flattened. Voices, 2 guards, approaching. Coulter signaled, "Wait." The guards passed the intersection. Max lunged. It was fast, quiet. He took one by the leg, dropped him. Coulter intercepted the other, slamming him to the wall, holding tight until the man slumped. They took key cards. One guard still groaned softly. Callie stood over him, staring. "That one, he used to bring the needles." Coulter wanted to end him, but Callie's eyes weren't asking for revenge, just truth. They left him unconscious. The control room was a cold chamber of monitors and servers. Mercy plugged in the flash drive. "Give me 60 seconds." Coulter watched the screens, one room at a time. Kids, dozens, some awake, some too sedated to lift their heads, all trapped in silence. Then he saw it, the red door, still there. Behind it, a dark chamber, its lights off, no cameras inside. "That's where they do the worst," Callie said softly. Coulter stepped to the mic. He pressed a button labeled "All Rooms, PIA System." He spoke into it, steady and low. "My name is Coulter. If you can hear this, you're not alone. Help is here. Hold on." Then the lights went out. An alarm began to wail. "Emergency lockdown," Mercy cursed. They triggered failsafe. Doors sealed. The gate outside reactivated. From the monitor, guards flooded the halls. Coulter looked at Callie. "I need you to show me what's behind that red door." She nodded once. No hesitation, just quiet, unbreakable resolve. They turned down the corridor as red strobes pulsed across the floor, and Max led them forward, teeth bared, ready. They weren't leaving until every child inside Lilac House walked free. If this story moved you, if you're as furious as we are that places like this can hide in plain sight, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below. Part 6 is coming, and everything's about to ignite. The hallway pulsed red like a wounded vein. Klaxons screamed from hidden speakers, warping the silence into chaos. Emergency shutters began to roll down from the ceiling, hissing as they sealed sections of the facility. But the corridor to the red door, room 13, remained open. For now. Callie's feet slapped the tile as she ran, her small hand gripping Coulter's. Max surged ahead, low to the ground, ears pinned, muscles taut like wire. Every part of him screamed purpose. He didn't bark. He didn't whine. He just moved, like he'd done before, in combat, in fire, in ruins. Mercy followed behind, breath ragged, clutching the hard drive against her chest like it was a living thing. Behind them, faint voices shouted orders. Boots pounded against concrete. "They're coming!" she called. Coulter didn't look back. "We hold that room, no matter what." As they reached it, Callie stopped. Her hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob. It was painted the same dull crimson, but years of heat and sun had made it crack like dried blood. "I used to scream," she whispered, "but no one ever heard." Coulter kneeled beside her. "I hear you now." She nodded. He lifted her gently to the side, drew his boot back, and slammed it into the door. Once, twice, a third time. Metal groaned. Then Max hit it like a battering ram. It burst inward. The smell hit first, chemical, coppery, like scorched wires and old pain. A single light flickered above, revealing a chamber not meant for children. Straps on the table, bolted stools, soundproofing foam, a cabinet of syringes, half used, all unlabeled. Callie froze. Mercy caught her. "It's not real anymore," she whispered. "You're not here." But Callie shook her head. "They're still using it." A boy was in the corner, curled up, shaking, no older than 7. Max approached slowly, crouched, whined softly. The boy looked up, saw him, and for a moment the fear broke. He reached out. Max nuzzled him, gently licking the salt from his cheek. Coulter turned to Mercy. "We can't wait. We break the locks on every door. Let the kids out. We use the comms to direct them out through the east stairwell." Mercy nodded. "But we still have to fight our way to the gate." Coulter glanced at Callie. "Number, we hold them off. You take the kids." Callie's voice was soft. "But they have guns." Max stood beside Coulter now. So did Callie. She looked at the boy in the corner, then back at the red door. Her voice didn't shake when she said, "You said we don't leave anyone behind." Outside the chamber, the intercom crackled. Vincent Rowland's voice slid through, cold as steel. "You don't know what you've walked into. This isn't a shelter. It's a firewall. We contain the ones the world can't." Coulter picked up the mic. "Number, you're just scared of the truth, and truth doesn't stay locked forever." He dropped the mic. Mercy returned from the panel. "Override's in. All the doors are open." All across the building, you could hear it. Footsteps, light ones, bare feet, scattered breath. Children peeking from their cells, seeing one another for the first time without glass in between. The fear was breaking. It was giving way to courage. Then, gunfire. A guard rounded the corner. Max was already moving. He collided mid-charge, teeth sinking deep into the man's arm. The gun clattered. Coulter grabbed it, slammed the stock into the guard's head. Mercy ducked into the hall. "They're sending more. 6, maybe 8. "We have to slow them down," Coulter said. "Buy the kids time to get out." Callie tugged his arm. "There's another way." She pointed down a side corridor. Faint symbols marked the wall. A black triangle, a handprint. "Rowland took some of us down there sometimes. We never came back up the same. But there's a tunnel." Coulter stared at her. "How do you remember this?" Callie looked at him, eyes fierce. "Because I never let myself forget." He believed her. They moved quickly, past open rooms, past children whispering to each other, holding hands, guiding the small ones toward the exit as Mercy's voice echoed through the intercom system, giving clear, steady instructions. To the tunnel. It was hidden behind a storage closet. Max sniffed it out first, pawing at a floor grate. Coulter lifted it. Beneath was a passage sloping downward. Dark, cramped, just wide enough for crawling. "I'll go first," Mercy said. She slid in, flashlight between her teeth. Callie followed. Max looked back at Coulter one last time before disappearing into the dark. Coulter turned back. More guards in the hallway now. Tactical gear, muzzle flashes in the distance. He lifted the mic one last time. "If you hear my voice, follow the dog. He's never let me down." Then he dropped the mic and joined them. They crawled through that tunnel for nearly half a mile. The heat intensified, sweat rolled down their backs. The light grew distant, but no one stopped. Then, cool air, open space. They emerged into a cave mouth, shielded by brush. And beyond that, a dry riverbed. Freedom. One by one, the children poured out from the hidden world behind them. More than 50, silent, wide-eyed, holding hands like they'd known each other forever. Coulter looked up at the stars. The sky stretched open, wide and forgiving. And still, no sirens. They weren't chasing. "They're going to cover it up," Mercy said quietly. "Claim it was a fire or a gas leak. Anything to hide what we saw." Coulter nodded. "But this time, we're ready." He pulled out the second drive, cloned from the facility's core server. Photos, records, testimonies, and one recording. Callie staring into the camera, saying her name, saying what they did to her, her voice steady as flame. "We send it to every journalist, every agency, every parents group we can find," Mercy said. "No more secrets." Coulter looked around. Dozens of kids wrapped in blankets now, some crying, some smiling for the first time. Max lay beside Callie, his head in her lap, tail thumping softly. And as the sun rose over the desert, painting the sky gold and rose and blood orange, they knew. They had just done something no one thought possible. They'd made them seen, and what was seen could never be unseen again. If this part struck you, if you felt the weight of what these children went through, help us spread it. Like, comment your thoughts and share this video. Subscribe to follow the next chapter, because the fight is far from over. Part 7 is coming. The desert wind was different at sunrise. It didn't scream like it had the night before. It moved softer now, carrying heat that hadn't yet turned to fire. In that brief moment before the world woke up, silence hung heavy, like breath being held. Coulter stood atop a ridge overlooking the riverbed, where the children huddled in clusters beneath the broad shade of scrub oaks and mesquite. Makeshift shelters, blankets, tarps, jackets, had been erected hastily. Mercy moved through them like gravity itself, checking pulses, wiping brows, pressing sips of water to cracked lips. She didn't smile, but she touched each child gently, as if telling them with her hands, "You're safe now. I swear it." Max lay at Callie's feet again, alert, but still. His eyes never left Coulter, and Coulter. He watched the edge of the horizon, waiting for the first sign of a dust trail, because he knew they hadn't escaped. Not really. He had seen the look in Rowland's eyes through that security feed. Cold calculation, not panic. Rowland didn't need to chase them. He would erase them. Mercy joined him on the ridge. Her face had streaks of dirt, sunburn blooming across her cheeks, but her eyes hadn't dimmed. "We've got maybe half a day before they know where we are," she said. "Sat imaging drones, contacts at Border Patrol. Doesn't take much. Half a day's a lifetime if we use it right." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his back pocket, creased, stained, and nearly falling apart. Mercy frowned. "What's that?" "Map my brother gave me, back when he used to run aid routes out here. There's a place, Old Ranger Outpost in the canyon. Has solar, storage, a working antenna. You think it still stands?" Coulter looked toward the horizon. "We don't need it to stand. We just need it to transmit." They packed quickly. Callie helped round up the others. She moved like a whisper between children who barely spoke, her presence enough to make them follow. They trusted her, even if they didn't know why, because she had survived something they all felt, but hadn't named yet. She was proof that escape was possible. The walk was slow. Some of the children limped, some had to be carried. Coulter took turns lifting a boy with a twisted ankle onto his back. Mercy rigged a stretcher from 2 jackets and some tree branches for a girl too weak to move. Max led. At one point, they passed a rattlesnake coiled on the trail, its tail twitching. Max stepped between the snake and the smallest girl. He didn't growl. He didn't bark. He simply stood, unmoving, until the snake backed down and slithered away into the underbrush. Even the desert seemed to understand Max was something else. By the time they reached the canyon, the sun was cruel and high. But the outpost was there, sun-bleached, overgrown, leaning to one side but intact. Coulter kicked the door in. Dust erupted from the floor like it was exhaling after years of silence. Inside, the radio was still mounted to the desk. Dead. Mercy began rewiring. Coulter lifted the solar panel from the side of the shack and angled it toward the sun, and the children sat in rows on the cool cement, passing canteens, whispering stories. Stories of rooms, of injections, of being told they didn't matter. Mercy got the radio working by sundown, and Callie stepped forward. "I want to be the one who speaks." Mercy looked at Coulter. He nodded. Callie's voice shook once, then it didn't. "My name is Callie. I am 9 years old. I was taken from a shelter in Tucson when I was 6. They told me I had special responses to trauma, that I could be useful. But they weren't doctors. They heard us. They watched us sleep. They told us if we ever left, no one would believe us." She paused, looking into the transmitter as if it were a person. "But someone did believe me. A man with sad eyes and a dog who looked straight into my soul. And now, we're free. And I'm telling you, someone is doing this to other kids right now. If you hear this, don't let them hide." Mercy sent the signal, repeated it. They broadcast it every 20 minutes, to shortwave, to satellite, to ham frequencies, to emergency bands. And then, they waited. That night, thunder rolled in over the canyon. No rain, just sound, like the sky remembering something it had once tried to forget. Coulter sat at the edge of the outpost roof, legs dangling. Max lay beside him, chin on his paws. "Think it'll be enough?" Coulter asked aloud. Max didn't move, but Callie's voice from behind him did. "It's already more than we had yesterday." Coulter turned. She climbed up beside him, hair tangled, eyes fierce. She handed him a folded piece of paper, her drawing from days before. The one with Max in the center, standing tall over a family with no faces. Now they had faces. Every child from the canyon. And Max still stood at the center. "You remembered them all," Coulter said. Callie nodded. "They matter." They sat in silence as the wind picked up, swirling dust across the canyon floor. In the distance, a flicker of light blinked once, twice, then nothing. "Someone heard," Mercy called from below. "Got a ping from New Mexico. They're forwarding it to reporters." A pause, then 2 more responses from different states. It was spreading. Hope for the first time was viral. But just as they began to breathe, a low rumble cut through the canyon. Not thunder, engines. Callie clutched the roof edge. Below, Mercy scrambled to the radio. Coulter stood, rifle in hand, scanning the horizon. Then he saw it. 2 black SUVs, government plates, no markings. "They found us." Max was already on his feet, tail raised, body rigid. But behind the vehicles came something unexpected. A van, covered in stickers. 2 journalists stepped out, one holding a camera, the other a boom mic. And behind them, several more vehicles. Activists, lawyers. One woman held a sign, "Where are our missing children?" They weren't here to silence. They were here to listen. Mercy laughed, a short, incredulous sound. "They came." Coulter lowered the rifle. "Not all of them, but enough," Mercy said. Children began emerging from the outpost, blinking in the headlights, squinting, holding hands. Max barked once, loud, clear, the kind of sound that didn't just echo, it announced. And the world finally heard it. If you're still here, if this part gave you hope, please like, comment what you felt, and share the story with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for part 8, because what comes next might be the most important chapter yet. Max stood perfectly still, tail lifted, ears pricked forward. The desert wind carried more than dust now. It carried truth, and truth was heavy. The headlights fanned across the canyon, cutting long shadows between the children and the approaching strangers. Cameras rolled. A dozen voices rose in confused awe and urgency. And through the din, the kids didn't cry or run. They watched, silent, waiting. Coulter descended the outpost steps like a man about to surrender to something bigger than himself. Not a fight, something deeper. Exposure. Mercy joined him, arms folded tight across her chest. She didn't look at the cameras. She looked at the children. She was watching their faces, making sure the cracks of fear didn't deepen now that the world was staring in. A woman broke from the cluster of arriving advocates. Late 40s, blazer, sun hat, throat tight with emotion. Are you the ones who sent the broadcast?" she asked, barely more than a whisper. Coulter nodded once. She looked past him toward Callie. "And that little girl, her voice..." Callie clutched Max's fur. Coulter glanced down, then raised his voice just enough to carry. "We're not here to answer questions. Not until these kids have food, shelter, and safety that doesn't come with a clipboard or chains." Another woman, a nurse with a Red Cross badge, nodded and turned back to the van. Within minutes, coolers of water, energy bars, and blankets were handed out. One child started to cry, not in fear, but from the overwhelming kindness of it. And still, Max didn't move from Callie's side. Then the journalist stepped forward, mic in hand. "Mr. Hayes, former Army intelligence, correct? Is it true these children were part of a secret facility operated under the guise of DHS?" Coulter's jaw clenched. Mercy interrupted. "This isn't a press briefing. You want your scoop? Fine, but you hear this first. This isn't about some sensational expose. These kids were failed, systemically, silently. And if we let the headlines become about anything else, they'll disappear again." Callie stepped forward. Her voice didn't shake this time. "Tell them what happened, all of it." And so Coulter did. Under the gaze of cameras and floodlights, he unfolded it all. The hidden transfers, the forged paperwork, the night at the shelter in Tucson when a girl named Callie vanished and no one filed a report. How a dog, discarded, misjudged, nearly euthanized, had sensed something no human could. How Max had pawed at Coulter's doubt until it cracked open into belief. And as he spoke, Children began adding pieces. I remember the cold room. They said if we told, our families would die. They made us call the man in the suit doctor, but he never touched a stethoscope. The journalist filming began to lower his camera, not out of disrespect, but reverence. Even he knew the lens couldn't capture what was happening here. By morning, satellite trucks had rolled in, and with them, consequences. Federal agents arrived in unmarked black vehicles. Some tried to assert jurisdiction, but they didn't expect resistance. Not from the children or the advocates, or even Max. One agent approached with a leash in hand. The dog needs to be evaluated. He could be a risk. Max bared his teeth. Callie stepped in front of him. He's the reason we're alive. Mercy crossed the distance in 2 strides. You touch that dog and I swear, every camera here gets an instant replay of you assaulting a 9-year-old. The agent backed down, and just like that, the balance tipped. By midday, the names of the children had been run through federal systems. Dozens had active missing persons files. 3 were supposed to be in foster care. One, an 11-year-old boy named Milo, was reported as deceased after a falsified fire record. His parents were flown in from Chicago that same night. When they saw him step from the outpost, thin but alive, the mother dropped to her knees. Her scream was equal parts agony and miracle. And Max, he walked over to her, sat down, let her wrap her arms around his thick neck like he was part of the family she had thought lost. No one had taught Max to be this. He simply knew. By the 3rd day, the shelter dog had a name in every headline. Max, the dog who uncovered America's hidden children. But none of them knew the full truth. They didn't know that 2 of the children still hadn't spoken, that one had woken up in the night shaking, whispering a name, Rallin. They didn't know that deep beneath the facility they'd fled from, a hard drive had been buried in concrete, or that Rallin had vanished without a trace, and that meant it wasn't over. Coulter stood in the canyon again on the 5th morning, watching the sun rise slow across Red Rock. The children were being relocated now, with vetted families, trauma counselors, and a federal task force overseeing every move. Mercy was staying on to work with the new nonprofit forming to protect them. Callie approached, her backpack slung loosely over one shoulder. She reached into the pocket and pulled something out. A dog tag, bent, scorched. Coulter blinked. Where did you get that? It was in Max's crate, tucked in the lining. He took it from her hand, fingers brushing the cold metal. The engraving was nearly gone, but the number, his brother's unit code, was still faintly visible. Coulter's breath caught. Your brother, the one who gave you the map? Callie asked softly. He nodded. I think Max knew. For a long moment, the only sound was wind through the canyon. Then Max trotted up beside them, dropped something at Coulter's feet, a worn piece of leather. The collar from that facility, still bearing the bar-coded tag. Coulter picked it up, staring at the numbers, memorizing them. I'm not done, he said, more to himself than anyone else. You're going after him, aren't you? Callie asked. Coulter looked at her. She didn't ask him not to go. She just nodded. I want to help. When I'm older, he smiled. You already have. She knelt to hug Max. You take care of him, okay? Max licked her cheek, a low whine in his throat. As the van carrying Callie and the others began to roll out, Coulter stood at the edge of the road, dog tag in one hand, the collar in the other. He didn't say goodbye. He said, Come on, Max. And the dog walked beside him, back toward the place where it had all begun, toward answers still buried, in a fight not yet finished. If this story moved you, please like the video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who still believes in the power of truth. Subscribe for part 9, because the next step in this journey will bring us face to face with the man behind it all. The road was silent except for the crunch of gravel beneath their boots and paws. No more helicopters, no reporters, just the raw, unfiltered quiet of aftermath. But even in the stillness, Coulter could feel it, that low hum beneath the surface, like something was still watching. Max didn't sniff. He stalked, not like a pet, not like a companion, like a soldier. 3 nights had passed since the children were moved into safety, but Coulter couldn't sleep. He'd spent those nights digging through files, reliving surveillance footage, mapping van routes, hunting inconsistencies in the logs they'd pulled from the outpost server before federal agents shut it down. One name kept echoing in the files, never stated plainly, always oblique, tucked into code phrases, initials, and offsite transfers. Rallin. Not a name that belonged to any government employee, but always connected to extended evaluations and off-grid compliance resets. The kind of language that sounds sterile until you've seen what it meant, until you've seen children flinch at the click of a latch, until you've watched Max freeze at the scent of bleach. Coulter traced the code numbers on the dog tag again, rubbing his thumb over the grooves. It was his brother's, Jeremy's. The man who disappeared 5 years ago after filing a whistleblower complaint against a defense contractor and never came home. They'd said Jeremy's body had been lost during a training accident in Nevada, but this tag wasn't scorched by a desert explosion. It had been tucked into a lining, hidden with care. That meant someone had kept it safe. Someone wanted it found, and someone wanted Coulter to know. At 2 a.m., he and Max arrived at a rundown maintenance depot near the edge of Santa Rosa, where nothing but chain-link fences and forgotten train cars occupied the land. The GPS ping led to a storage unit buried behind rusted sheet metal and electric silence. Coulter crouched beside the gate's keypad. It looked like a relic, decades old, but when he typed in the unit code from the collar Max found, the light blinked green. He opened the door. Inside was darkness, cold, concrete. The smell of disinfectant hit him like a slap. Max didn't growl. He let out a low guttural chuff and paced a tight circle around the entrance before locking his gaze on the far left corner of the unit. A faint red light blinked there, barely visible behind stacked wooden crates. Coulter stepped inside slowly, his flashlight tracing arcs across plastic sheeting and old military crates stenciled with codes: Lighter, Theta Comms, Phoenix Protocol. Nothing about this was civilian. He cracked open one of the crates. Inside, videotapes, paper files, and a hard drive wrapped in anti-static foil. It was heavier than expected. Max pawed the ground next to a second crate, whining. Coulter opened that one too. A laptop, cracked screen, still warm. Someone had been here, recently. That's when he saw it, written in faint black Sharpie across the inner crate wall. CH, if you're reading this, they didn't get me. Yet, R knew we were close. Follow the whispers, not the noise. He's still inside. Jeremy. Coulter staggered back a step, knees weak. Max pressed into his leg, a steadying weight, and then the click. Metal, behind them. The unit door slammed shut. Darkness, followed by footsteps. One pair, slow, deliberate. A voice filtered in, calm and sharp like polished glass. I wondered when you'd come. Coulter tensed. Rallin? The voice smiled, if such a thing could be heard. I suppose that name fits, doesn't it? Like an old uniform. Still has blood on the sleeves, but tailored just right. Coulter drew his pistol. You ran those kids like lab rats. You erased their families. Who are you? The steps paused just beyond the crates. You think you're here for answers? You're not. You're here because someone inside wanted you to be. Someone who never understood the cost of protection? A pause. The dog. He remembers me, doesn't he? Max snarled. Low, primeval. That's why I left the tag, the voice added softly. A clue, a kindness. I knew he'd bring you to me. You're lying, Coulter said, though doubt began threading through his voice. You don't even know what you're standing on, Rallin murmured. This is just one location, one shell. There are 12 more. Real ones. Operational. Do you really think those children were the only ones? Coulter's hand tightened on the pistol. Why? Because no one looks for the unwanted, the untraceable. They slip through systems like sand. And we collect sand. For defense, for research, for control. He stepped into the light finally. Mid-50s, clean suit, no weapon, but his eyes. They weren't wild. They were calm, certain. Coulter raised his weapon. You're going to answer for all of it? Rallin didn't blink. Then do it. Kill me. Burn this place to the ground. but it won't change what's already out there. It won't stop what's coming. Max lunged then, silent, fast, all fury and precision. But Rowland didn't flinch. Instead, he held something out. A small object. Click. A loud, high-pitched whine filled the unit. Max yelped and collapsed. Coulter fired. The bullet struck the device. Sparks flew. The noise stopped. Max stirred, dazed but breathing. Rowland was gone. The back panel of the unit, a steel door, hung open. Coulter ran to it, but all that remained was a long, dark service tunnel carved under the depot, and the echo of boots receding into the black. He didn't chase. Instead, he dropped to his knees beside Max. "Hey," he whispered, rubbing the dog's shoulder. "Come back to me." Max blinked, then licked his hand. Relief pulsed through Coulter's veins like electricity. Later, as dawn cracked the sky in molten gold, Coulter stood outside the unit, hard drive in one hand, the broken device in the other. The sun hit the glint of the dog tag, still looped through his laces. He looked at Max, who stood again, head low but eyes alert. "Looks like we're not done after all." Max thumped his tail once quietly, because now they knew. Rowland was real. The network was deeper than anyone feared, and somewhere more children waited for someone to follow the whispers. And this time, they weren't alone. If you're still with us, thank you. Please take a moment to like, comment, and share this video. And don't forget to subscribe, because in part 10, we bring everything full circle. Max's final mission is more than a rescue, it's a reckoning. The sun rose in a blur of gold and crimson, the light spilling through the trees like liquid fire. But to Coulter, it felt hollow. The world seemed unchanged, silent, peaceful. But beneath it all, the ticking clock, the hum of danger, was still there. He could feel it, gnawing at his ribs. Max stood beside him, now fully recovered, his coat gleaming in the early light. His ears were sharp, eyes scanning, as if the world was still not safe. As if, like Coulter, he was waiting for the next strike. They were no longer chasing ghosts. They were chasing justice. After the tunnel, after Rowland's vanishing act, Coulter spent days trying to pull threads, any thread, of this sprawling web together. They traced back to a few crucial names that led to the very highest levels of government contractors and defense agencies. But there were walls, big walls, the kind that only the rich, the powerful, and the protected can build. None of the documents Coulter found had public significance. On the surface, they looked like ordinary reports, but each one had coded markings, embedded messages that pointed to the same chilling conclusion. The human trafficking ring wasn't just local, it was global, and it was covered up by those who swore to protect. A week later, Coulter found himself standing on the steps of a courthouse. The case was small, a minor complaint filed against a local child advocacy group for violating regulations. On the surface, it seemed insignificant, but Coulter had a feeling. Max shifted beside him, sensing it too. As the doors opened, the group of lawyers, agents, and bureaucrats filed in, their faces too rehearsed, too clean. Then he saw her, Emily, the woman who had been following the case from the very beginning, a low-profile whistleblower whose evidence had all but vanished. Her eyes met Coulter's across the room. She was safe, for now. Behind her, a shadow moved in the crowd, Rowland, the same man from the unit, his presence now unmistakable. And this time, it was not a game of cat and mouse. Coulter's heart pounded, his mind raced. Max growled low, his hackles raised. This was it. He had to act now. Before he could make a move, a voice sliced through the air, a deep, cold voice that made every muscle in his body tighten. "You think you can expose us, Coulter?" Rowland stood, his dark eyes gleaming with a dangerous calm. He was in a suit now, but his gaze was colder than ever. "Your little dog can't save you this time." Coulter took a deep breath, stepping forward. His body was taut, ready for whatever came next. Max stayed close, unshaken. He knew what was coming, and he was prepared. "I'm not here for you," Coulter said, his voice calm but full of fury. "I'm here for them, the people you've hurt." Rowland smiled. It wasn't a smile of victory, but a smile of pity. "They'll never know. No one will. You're just one man. One broken man with a dog, and I've seen people like you before." "You're wrong," Coulter replied. "We've got the evidence, and the truth always comes out." Rowland's eyes flickered for a brief moment. A flash of something, fear perhaps. He wasn't as invincible as he thought. Without warning, Coulter moved. He had no time for games. No more hiding. No more waiting. Max lunged, but it wasn't at Rowland. It was at the briefcase in his hand. The briefcase with the list, the names, the connections. Max grabbed it with precision, like he'd done 1,000 times before, and yanked it from Rowland's grip, holding it firmly in his teeth. For the first time in their shared journey, Rowland hesitated. "I don't need that anymore," he said, his voice a whisper of desperation. Coulter's eyes locked onto Rowland's. "I'll make sure everyone knows the truth," he said, his voice cold and final. Max returned to Coulter's side, the briefcase now in his mouth. Coulter turned to Emily, nodding at her. "Get this out of here," he ordered. "It's time." She nodded, moving swiftly to a safe exit. Coulter's eyes stayed fixed on Rowland, who now appeared utterly powerless. The mask had slipped, and the man behind the lie was no longer untouchable. Coulter stepped back slowly, keeping his gun trained on Rowland. He wasn't going to let this slip away. It was a long moment before Rowland spoke again. "Don't make a martyr out of me, Coulter." "I'm not," Coulter replied quietly. "I'm making you human." And that was it. Rowland had no choice but to face what was coming. The truth was unstoppable now. The walls were coming down. Later that evening, when the case finally broke in the media, when the evidence was aired, and when the world began to realize the enormity of the crimes that had been buried for so long, Coulter felt something stir inside him, a sense of finality. Max pressed his side against Coulter's leg as they stood on the porch of their home, watching the stars above. The weight of what they had uncovered would take years to fully expose, but for the first time in a long time, Coulter allowed himself to feel hope. Not for the world, which was still broken in so many ways, but for the families they'd saved, for the children who now had a chance at life, and for Max, who had been with him every step of the way. Together, they'd put an end to one chapter. But there would always be more work to do, and now they were ready. Hope, Coulter realized, didn't come easily. It was earned. In small acts of courage, in relentless pursuit of what's right, and in the loyalty of a dog who never gave up. If you've made it this far, thank you for following Max and Coulter's journey. If you want to hear more stories of hope, justice, and redemption, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because together we can change the world one act of courage at a time. If this story moved you even a little, don't forget to like, share, and drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you want more powerful emotional stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. There's so much more to come.